Welcome all, I'm Anthony Wilson, the Communications Director for the City of San Angelo, and you are tonight part of an experiment on our part. We are engaged in our annual process from which we are gathering public input, your thoughts, your ideas, on what should be San Angelo's top infrastructure priorities as reflected in our capital improvement plan. And so typically we hold some town hall forums across the community in order to gather that input. But we're doing something a little different tonight. Instead of trying to have you engage on our terms, we're trying to engage you on your terms. That means you don't have to trudge out to the convention center or to a local school or a local church in order to share your thoughts with us. You can do that from the comfort of your home, perhaps from your PJs, perhaps with an adult beverage, and just share with us what you think should be in our capital improvement plan. So we're going to be engaged in a conversation tonight, and we're happy to answer your questions, but more importantly, we want your ideas. We want your thoughts as to, again, what should be San Angelo's top infrastructure priorities. So we have some city officials, some of my colleagues who are going to be joining us tonight, beginning with our city manager, Daniel Valenzuela, and our budget manager, Kimberly Hawley. We appreciate you guys being with us tonight.
We are looking forward to this tonight.
So Daniel, start us off here. Tell us, what is the capital improvement plan, or the CIP as we typically refer to it, and why is it important?
The CIP plan is a list of projects that the city has, whether they're funded, partially funded or unfunded. And it really is a listing of those projects that our community could see in the near future. It's important to us as we start planning for funding. Now this is not a funding mechanism, it really is just a tool that we use, but it does list all those projects that the city can consider, the city council can consider for future funding and development. So on our part, it's important to hear from the citizens so the city councils can also understand what it is that they're prioritizing. We value, of course, our citizens' input. And it bears a lot of weight for council members when they start looking at if you have a project that's consistently reported as one of the top priorities for our citizens, and that's one that will get some special consideration.
And so, as you mentioned, this is not a budget, and simply because a project is in the plan does not necessarily mean, first of all, that it will be done, or second of all, that it will be funded. So how does the plan inform the city council's decision-making when it comes time to approving the annual budget?
Well, what's important is, as you mentioned a while ago, it doesn't mean just because the project is on there that it's going to be completed within a certain time frame, but it does give the city council an opportunity to look at those projects, and as I mentioned ago, that the citizens did prioritize. Now, it is important to note that that project needs to be on the CIP plan for the city council to even consider, have consideration for future funding.
So Kimberly, as our budget manager, I want you to talk about the process of how the proposed CIP comes together.
You know, the CIP is a pretty long process for the departments at the city, and we spend a lot of time making sure all the data and it's very thorough, and that if city council were to tell us to move forward with a project, we really have what is required of us to actually move forward. So the CIP process starts in December, and our directors started gathering data, providing us information. We look at potential funding sources. We look at current and past funding sources. And then we look at the detail and the description of the project, and then its time frame. We also do some cash flows and whatnot when looking at those. That helps council when they decide to do a project.
And so talk a little bit about the timetable of events that will lead up from this evening, up until the City Council considering passage of the capital improvement plan on April the 1st.
So, as you mentioned earlier, we're super excited about tonight's online forum. We really want some good feedback from our citizens. And then we're going to have a traditional town hall meeting next Tuesday. March 12th. We'll start at 5:30 at the McNeese Convention Center, and Again, we'll be going through much of the same information. Our directors will be available to answer questions, but more than anything, we just want our community's input on which projects are important. We also have our online survey available, and that's running live right now, so you can log on to our website. That's cosatx.us/CIP input. And there's a really short one-question survey. If you'll fill out, tell us what city projects and infrastructure needs are important to you. And that'll be live until the 17th of March.
And that's a very open-ended question, so people can put whatever answer that they want.
Yes, it's an open-ended question. The question is pretty much, tell us what's important to you.
And also, if people want to look at the plan as it stands right now, proposed,
Yes.
they can do that on our website as well.
Yes, our proposed draft plan is available under Finance on the CIP website, and you can also look at previous year's approved documents.
And so I just want our viewers to know there's a really easy URL to get to that. It's cosatx.us/CIP, and there'll be a link there to the proposed plan. So Daniel, talk a little bit about the role that citizen input plays into shaping the CIP.
Well, again, it does, it goes back to the fact that City Council will be reviewing the CIP, and the citizen input it's exactly what it is. It gives you an opportunity as a citizen to let us know, again, what is it that's important to you? We definitely want to know that, because as we look forward to our funding, we want to make sure that we look at those projects that citizens have told us overwhelmingly a lot of times that this is what we'd like to see happen in our community. This is what's important to us. And this is what will make it better for us. A lot of times we hear about streets, but we also hear about quality of life projects. But on our end, we just want to hear from you. And it's really important that we know what's in your mind, unless you call in or you type in at this point today, or you show up at those forums, we won't know. So it really is important to get your thoughts and your ideas in.
So a little bit more than a week ago, the City Council engaged in its annual strategic planning session, and they recommitted to their top 3 strategic priorities. And those are, of course, infrastructure, both water and streets, its economic development, and its public safety. So does a project stand a better chance of being included in and being funded in the capital improvement plan if that aligns with a City Council priority?
It definitely does. One thing that I do want to point out is that a lot of times people think that the city has deep pockets. We really don't. We have a limited amount of money that we can use for these projects. So anytime that a citizen voices an idea that they would like to see as far as a project, if it's closely aligned with the City Council has already listed as their top priorities, the ones you just listed a while ago, it definitely has a better chance of receiving funding. It doesn't mean because it doesn't align with the City Council meetings that it's not going to have any consideration whatsoever. But if it does, yes, I think it's a lot better, and you'd be a lot closer to getting that funding if in fact it does line up.
So Kimberly, tell us how many proposed projects there are in the plan, and what is the total value of all of those projects?
Our current proposed projects, so those projects within the next 5 years, we're looking at about 80 projects. Which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but really in the grand scheme of things, that's quite a bit going on in this city in a 5-year timeline. And that dollar value, we're looking at $425 million for those projects in the next 5 years. Our current year's budget in a 5-year projection. So we're issuing $80 million in debt just to do streets every 2 years. And those funds unfortunately don't cover all the streets that all of our citizens want paved, but we're taking every dollar that we have and trying to spread it and match it with grants to do as much as we can for our community.
And so again, those 80 projects, there isn't actually an identified funding source for all 80 of those projects. In fact, the vast majority of them do not yet have an identified funding source.
Right. A majority of the projects are certainly street and water infrastructure. And we have proposed funding sources for those, but not all of that's verified and confirmed, and there's a lot of projects on there with a complete undetermined funding source.
So Kimberly has mentioned streets and water. Those are among the City Council's top 2 priorities. So we're going to play a little bit of musical chairs here in the studio, and we're going to replace Kimberly with Ricky Dixon. He is our Executive Director of Public Works, because we want to touch on 3 topics this evening, just very briefly. But again, mainly we are here to receive your ideas, your thoughts on what should be San Angelo's top infrastructure priorities. But we do want to give you sort of a sense of how water, how streets, and how our Parks and Recreation system play into the capital improvement plan. So as I mentioned, Ricky Dixon, our Executive Director of Public Works, has joined us on set. Ricky, tell us, what's one water project that you think is of importance, impact, and certainly public interest that is in the plan or maybe has just recently been completed?
The main one that I think has a great impact on San Angelo is the one that's currently in the plan, is the Hickory Wellfield expansion. The Hickory Wellfield is San Angelo's only groundwater source that we have. It further drought proofs us in times of, if we get back into 2012, 2013 timeframe. The expansion will give us our full allotments, which is 12,000 acre feet a year. San Angelo can make it on 12,000 acre feet a year if that's all we have. And it's just a good supplement for the city of San Angelo's water supply.
And so is the Concho River Water Project, which we've been hearing a lot of recently, we're aiming at this to be our next water supply source. Is it in the capital improvement plan?
We have started the process. There's a lengthy permitting process. We have to have a discharge permit and bed and banks permit, and that could take 3 to 5 years. This is a 5-year plan, so I look for it to come online in the capital improvement program probably 3 years or so, a little further down the line after we get a little closer to permits.
And so is it fair to say a lot of the water projects that are in the plan right now are related to improvement or replacement of infrastructure, whether that be water mains or perhaps improvements to our water and wastewater plants?
They're working hand in hand with the street program. As they are rebuilding streets, we're replacing all the utilities under them, so we don't have to go back in there and dig up a new street. So it's all critical in that step.
So how is the rate adjustment that we've adopted recently over the past few years, has that put the water utility in a better position in order to pay for these infrastructure projects that we're talking about?
Without the rate adjustment that they did, we knew that there was going to have to be some water project when they started the plan. And without the rate adjustment, we would not be able to fund these plans. It's critical that the rate adjustment continues so we can fund these water sources.
So Daniel, do you think it's easier to fund a water project since it has a dedicated revenue source versus a project that has to compete with operating expenses in the general fund, which, as you know, is supported mainly by property taxes and sales tax dollars?
Sure, absolutely. Kind of elaborate on what Ricky was just talking about a little while ago. You know, we did implement, again, that 5-year rate plan, and really did 3 things, right? It made sure that we could build up our fund balance again. At one point, we had dwindled down to pretty much nothing. And second, as you mentioned a while ago, is a pay-as-you-go, as they're replacing current infrastructure that's in the ground at this point. But it's also partially, the third part of it is to pay for a future project. At the time that we talked about a future project, we talked about a project of about $136 million that will assist the city into the future. So again, that plan was threefold. So yes, it's a lot. I wouldn't say it's easier to fund a water project because there's still fees associated with it, and there's still considerations that have to be made by the city council. But yes, we do have a dedicated revenue source for those.
So I just want to mention we have actually our first comment here. It actually comes from our friends at the Concho Bass Club, who did great work this past weekend out at Twin Buttes helping to clean up that property with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. But they said continued investment in our infrastructure, also securing further water supply resources. So Ricky, I guess you can assure that that is definitely on the radar.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to switch out Ricky real quick with Shane Kelton. He is our operations director because we want to talk about the city's second highest priority, which is streets. And so Daniel, as Shane is coming out here onto the studio, as I mentioned, we had our strategic planning workshop a little more than a week ago, and the city council really honed in on streets, and they seemed really dedicated to devoting as many dollars as possible to improving San Angelo streets.
That's correct. And as Holly mentioned a while ago, we do have that $80 million amount that's actually over 10 years. And that is through certificates of obligation to pay for reconstruction, mill and overlay projects. But we also have the monies that we have as a pay-as-you-go that we budget that does a seal coat program for the city as well. So we do have those sources, but we do understand, though, even with all the work, we're actually putting about $11 to $12 million a year on just streets alone. But we know that we have more needs. We know that over the years, through some deferred maintenance, a lot of cities do that. You know, when times get rough, they defer maintenance, and they don't do maintenance that 1 year. They'll skip a year. Sometimes they skip a few years. And because of that, the city does have a lot of streets that need a lot of work. And that's something that was touched on quite adamantly by the city council at our planning workshop, that we have this solid plan, but we want to do more. And that's something that we're planning for. As more monies come in, we've been very fortunate that sales tax revenues have gone up higher. We want to make sure that we dedicated that money toward our infrastructure. We're not in the business of growing government. We're not going to hire more employees just because the revenues are coming in better as far as sales tax. We want to make sure we take those monies and we dedicate them to infrastructure projects.
So we've, as I said, been joined by our operations director, Shane Kelton. So Shane, tell us about a street project that is either underway or just recently completed that is part of the CIP.
Well, I think the biggest one that everybody has talked about for years and years and years is Bell Street. Bell Street is currently underway. Of course, it's such a large project that it's going to take the next 3 years for us to really see it come to fruition and to have the roadway that we've been wanting for years and years over there. So, but that is one. That's the big one. That's the one that everybody talked about forever and ever that we got in our CIP. It was up at the very top of our CIP, and we've started work on it. Again, we're a good year into that project, working on the very north end right now. But as we're moving along, the guys are making good progress, and so I think I'm looking forward to it. So
yeah, and a lot of, as we were chatting before we went on the air tonight, a lot of people think that construction hasn't begun because what's actually occurring is on the far north end of Bell Street. But if people will drive beyond the loop or beyond the expressway, they'll see a lot of construction going on up there. Oh, they will. It's they've got a lot of concrete already poured up there, up along Ricks Drive. So those people in the Paul Ann subdivision, the people that go Old Ballinger Highway up into the producers and the stockyards in that area, up in that area, they see it on a daily basis. And but again, yeah, go up there. It's looking great. That it's really going to be a vast improvement over what we've had. So. And if you don't believe that, just go drive MLK right now, because it is smooth sailing down MLK, which was our first street reconstruction project. And as Ricky mentioned, that project in Bell Street also involves replacing and in the case of Bell Street, relocating water and sewer lines as part of that massive project. Correct, and we're making sure as we do that, and we go along with all of these projects that are in our initial 10-year bond-funded projects, when we're going through those, we are making sure that whether it's city infrastructure, whether it's water and sewer, or whether it's cable or gas or any of those, or telecommunications, that we're making sure that we're working to relocate those and make sure that hopefully in the future, if we have to deal with water mains or sewer mains and things like that, that we're not having to constantly be digging in the streets to repair those lines, that we can actually get them out from under the streets where possible and where feasible to make sure that our streets stay in as good shape as long as they can. So a lot of our viewers may remember a few years back now, we did a comprehensive study of every single street in San Angelo. How has that, Shane, informed the decisions about which street projects to include in the capital improvement plan? When of course, we needed a starting point, we needed a basis point for us to start with, and that's why we hired Fugro to come in and actually measure all of our streets and see where we are. And that way, one, we can make an informed decision on what rehabilitation projects each street segment needed, whether that was just a routine maintenance will get us by on that street, or if it's one of those that a mill and overlay will get us by, or we need to actually do full reconstruction on them. So that was kind of our starting point, basis point. And then we asked Fugro, the firm that actually did the study for us, to look at not only all of that information that they collected, but then look at average daily traffic, what the structure of the road is what's it designed for? Is it a collector, an arterial
a local road residential street, based on its condition, based on the volume of traffic, and based on the funding that we have, that we've identified in our $80 million bond project, you know, what projects will serve us the best over this time to get us basically the biggest bang for our buck, what's going to do us the best over time with the amount of funding that we have, and give us a priority listing, and that's what the FUGRO did. And so we have a longer listing than what our $80 million will actually fund to start with, but that's how that all kind of wrapped itself up, and that's how we started including everything within our CIP process.
And so, as you mentioned, Bell Street's under reconstruction right now, and if memory serves me correctly, the next two big reconstruction projects, not just a repaving, but a total reconstruction, are on College Hills and on Southwest.
Yes, College Hills, of course, is really it's going to rival Bell Street as far as what it is, and of course some of the it's got some other issues with it too, drainage issues that we're having to look at and work through that whole process with as we go into designing. And of course, you know, Southwest, we have it in two phases, Phase A and Phase B. Phase A is going to be from Twin Mountain down to Rockbrook, and it is going to be more, other than the intersection Southwest, it's going to be a mill and overlay. We'll reconstruct that one intersection and do a little more in-depth work at the railroad crossing. But Phase B is where we're going to see a lot of the heavy work, the reconstruction work, where we start from Rockbrook going back all the way under the loop, back around to over by where Cavender's and all the...
Essentially all the way to the expressway.
All the way to the expressway, back around. And that's where you see a lot more of the reconstruction efforts taking place, where the streets have really deteriorated over there a lot faster due to the subsurface soils and what we're dealing with there. And then of course too, the one that everybody hates is right there by the McDonald's and the low water crossing right there, and bringing that low water crossing up and it really improving that area.
And so, as I mentioned, we are here to really listen to your ideas. So if you have ideas of street or drainage projects that you think ought to be included in the plan, then please include those in your comments on this video. Back to our city manager, Daniel. The street needs are so massive in this community. How do we reasonably go about tackling and paying for those?
You know, and again, that's a question that came up at the workshop that we had with city council members, and really, it's keeping the course at this point. I talked about the deferred maintenance in the past that right now we're trying to overcome. So we do know that as I mentioned a while ago, we are budgeting about $11 to $12 million per year to address not just the reconstruction, mill and overlay, but also seal coat. But knowing that we have those projects that we want to do even more streets, part of the strategy that we have, and it's something that the mayor has stressed for such a long time, is we need to build our tax base. Right now, we have a disproportionate percentage. When you start looking at commercial accounts versus the residential, we have a lot more residential as opposed to our commercial. We want to build up our tax base to ensure that that's through economic development, to ensure that in the future, less the burden is on our citizens as far as our residential, and also some of our commercial accounts right now, customers, because as that grows and it's kind of distributed across other customers, the commercial customers, the burden becomes lighter. But the thing is that we want to grow our tax base so that we can actually bring in more revenues. We want to look at sales tax revenues. Our sales tax revenues have grown. We can do that through different ways. You know, part of it is through tourism and working with the CVB and the Chamber of Commerce, all of us working together to grow our community. But we need those additional revenues. We need to look at our expenditures to see if there's areas that we can cut back on and kind of loosen up some of those money so that we can redirect that. So again, with all the needs that we have, a lot of times 11, 12 million sounds like a lot of money per year, but it's actually not quite enough for all the needs that we currently have. And we just have to continuously plan and ensure that any additional monies that are coming in, again, as I mentioned a while ago, that we are redirecting that toward our infrastructure and not anything else.
So we're going to play musical chairs just one more time here. We're going to switch out our operations director, Shane Kelton, with our Parks and Recreation Director, Carl White. But I want to mention just a couple of comments that have been made thus far. And again, we really want your ideas as to what you think San Angelo's top infrastructure needs ought to be, whether that's water or streets or something related to our parks and recreation system, or something such as suggested here by Jenny Wilson, who is the Executive Director of Concho Valley Paws, who is our partner out at the animal shelter and handles all of our animal adoptions out there. And so not surprisingly, Jenny is advocating for the animal shelter, and she says it's in desperate need of repairs and upgrades. Not only is space an issue, but air quality and plumbing needs top the list. I would love to see the shelter become one of the priorities in this community. And that's actually the sort of feedback, Daniel, that we're looking for, isn't it?
That is correct. So again, and that is on our radar. As a matter of fact, last year, the City Council did added some additional funding for the animal shelter. So we do want to hear that. You know, we have plenty of people that are saying, hey, this is really a top priority for us. Again, the City Council will take a closer look at that.
And then we had someone else who also weighed in and just echoed what the Concho Bass Club did. Blake Hartsfield says, you know, again, more continued investment in the infrastructure, which we seem to be doing, and securing additional water supplies, which ditto on that as well. So we're now joined by our Parks and Recreation Director, Carl White. So Carl, the same question that I've asked your peers. Give us a parks project that is underway or recently completed that was part of our CIP.
There's two I can mention. The first one is we just completed it. It's a new restroom facility at the Texas Bank Sports Complex. When we built that facility in 2009, we programmed in 2 restroom buildings. And one restroom building is basically in the center of the main tournament area. And hosting tournaments, we realized that if you have teams playing at one quad, it can be up to 3 football fields walk to the next quad to go to the restrooms. So that was one of our biggest concerns, is the need to add additional restrooms. Thankfully, we had a funding source. It was a smaller project. We designed and built the restrooms, and they were open now for the public and for the tournaments that we have coming up. Another project is parking lot over by Station 618, the senior center. It took a long time to get to the point where we could fund that project and do it, but it is nearing completion. Should be wrapping up here in the very near future. And that basically took an area where we had a very small parking area and built a new one adjacent to the Station 618 and the Ruffini Church that's been added to the Old Town area. Provided better parking, safer parking, better access and accessibility.
You know, it strikes me that people might say, well, a restroom and a parking lot, what kind of a parks project is that? But those things actually sprang from a process much like this, where people told us, hey, we need an additional restroom at the sports complex, or parking was really at a premium over at the senior centers, and those seniors who frequent those facilities were just saying, we have got to have more parking.
That's a good point. Both of those projects came directly from public input and public need.
So, Carl, you will soon be updating the Parks Master Plan, which leads to the city collecting a lot of state grant dollars. So it's a very valuable document for us. But as part of that process, you're going to be surveying citizens. Do you anticipate that that particular process will yield some ideas that will end up as projects in the capital improvement plan?
Yes, I do. We always do every time we do update the master plan. The last time we did it was 2012. And this is an example. Before that time, we'd heard some folks interested in having a dog park for the city. And it never ranked high in our master plans before. In 2012, based on the survey, it ranked at number 2. And so that led to gearing up and making sure we had a dog park.
Well, and of course that effort was helped by the fact that it was privately funded for the most part. I mean, there were some real champions for that project who took it upon themselves to raise the funds.
The vast majority was private funds.
So, Daniel, infrastructure is, of course, a priority of vital importance. So how do you balance quality of life projects such as those represented by Parks and Recreation? How do you balance those, and how do they play into the plan and into your and the City Council's thinking in the whole scope and scheme of things?
Well, we know that quality of life is important for our community. Again, as we go outside the community and try to recruit new industry, new business to here, they do look at our quality of life. And especially new businesses, they're bringing families here, they're looking at that. What exactly is the community doing for our families? But mostly for us right now, it's for our families that live here right now. Quality of life is something that we champion, is something that's important to us. It is very difficult at times because we have those competing projects, especially with infrastructure, streets. Sometimes that takes precedence over anything else, but this is important. And what Carl was talking about a while ago as far as that master parks plan, we need that in place in order for us to apply for those grants and to qualify for those type of grants. Now, we also talked about the dog park a little while ago. Sometimes some of these projects will actually move to the top, for funding if we have some monies that have already been raised through private organizations or other groups. And what we end up doing is leveraging those monies and adding just a little bit to it to complete those projects. So anything that we can do in working with other organizations is something that we do look forward to. It actually makes it a lot easier for us to complete some of those projects. So we'd love to be able to work with the community. Again, some of those projects will rise to the top if there's a funding source available outside of just the city through grants or donations.
And again, we want to hear your thoughts about what should be in the plan, and we've got a couple more comments online. So if you have ideas, please add them to the comments right now. But we had another person, Jody Sturgis, who weighs in, and she says, help is needed at the animal shelter. And then Santiago Rodriguez says, you guys have been doing a fine job in making San Angelo beautiful. So I guess that's maybe kudos to your guys in the Parks and Recreation Department there, Carl. So, it occurs to me, people can get very cynical about government, and they say, does this process really matter? And so I think you two are probably the two perfect people to say, or to talk about how it is that we ended up with a columbarium at Fairmount Cemetery.
Actually, do you want to tackle that, Carl?
Sure, yes, that's the result of a master plan that the cemetery did. I can't remember the year, but it's been maybe 8 years ago. And that was led by the Friends of Fairmount. And based on the master plan, looked at what improvements could be done, should be done at the cemetery, and the columbarium rose to the top. And they lobbied, went to city council meetings, went to CIP meetings, and lobbied for support for that project, and it got funded.
So that project was a direct result of this process that we're engaged in right now.
It wasn't on staff's radar in terms of adding that facility.
So, and again, came directly from the citizens. So we've got a couple more comments here. Brandon Whitford says, would love to see splash pads across town. And of course, that's something I think that we have heard before. Eris Martinez says, water, streets, animal shelter. Great point, great ideas of the people, the community of San Angelo, Texas, for the city of San Angelo to respond to the voices of their community for a better quality of life within San Angelo's community. So, I mean, that's really what this whole process is about.
Absolutely.
And then we have someone saying infrastructure and water are definitely a priority, but let's not forget about the things that make San Angelo like upgrades to Fort Concho. So Carl, maybe just touch on there, because there have been some recent improvements, and there are also some plans in place for improving Fort Concho.
There are many plans in place for different improvements. One that's half sales tax funded in part is a new visitor center for Barracks 1 and 2 for Fort Concho. We've done renovations of OQ1 recently, complete renovation. We need to replace roofs at virtually all the rest of the buildings. We've got other projects, and City Council recently allocated some money to do some improvements in terms of replacing columns, replacing fascia boards, replacing porches, replacing window frames to help bring it back up.
When do you expect that work to begin?
This spring.
All right. So again, we want your ideas. If we don't get ideas, we'll go ahead and shut this down, because we don't want to keep you guys any longer than we have to. But if you've got some ideas. So one thing I want to mention again that was mentioned at the very beginning of this program is that we have two other ways in which you can communicate your ideas to us. One of them is very simple, and if you're watching this, you're obviously doing it in front of a computer screen right now, and that is to go to our website and go to costatx.us/CIP input. As our budget manager, Kimberly Holly, said a little earlier, there is a one-question survey on there, and it simply asks, what do you think should be our priorities when it comes to capital needs for the city of San Angelo. And you can put anything that you want. So please go to that. You have until March the 17th in order to fill out that survey. And then we will actually be doing this live and in person on Tuesday night at 5:30 at the McNeese Convention Center. We'll have more city officials there to listen to your ideas, respond to any questions that you might have. But that is obviously a live forum. The public is invited, and we're happy to have you come out and share your ideas with us. Again, that's at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March the 12th. And we will be broadcasting that live both on our Facebook page and on SATV Sudden Link Channel 17. So someone says, powerful, great response, City of San Angelo. Amanda Stone says, I very much agree with Jenny Wilson about the animal shelter needing to be a priority and the desperate need of upgrades to the facility to best meet the needs of the animals. The roads around town also need attention. Many potholes and torn up major streets leading to my 2 damaged tires in less than 2 months. We're obviously very sorry about that. But Daniel, maybe talk a little bit about how the rains actually have exacerbated the condition of the streets.
They have. You know, we received a lot of rain at the end of this past year, and God-given rain. We were so thankful for that. A lot of people were praying for that. Of course, one of the side effects of that, though, is that a lot of that rain does seep in through the cracks in our streets, and it damages the base, and that's when you start seeing these potholes. We've had actually staff that worked around the clock around that time to try to get those potholes repaired. And initially, we were going around just filling potholes, and because they were just popping up just everywhere. And we know that there's a process that we follow where we actually cut everything out, and we do it in a manner that is more of a long-term fix. But for a while there temporarily, we have to do those short-term fixes just to make sure that we did cover up some of those holes. So again, yes, a lot of the rain that came in caused a lot of damage. Of course, we're blessed to have that rain, but we also are dealing with the end result of that as well.
What do you think are the possibilities that we could end up with a paving crew, you know, with their own equipment, tackling some of the less intensive projects that we have around town?
That is something that has been discussed. It's something that would have to be planned out. You know, right now the city of San Angelo sits at a 3% unemployment rate, and it becomes more difficult to hire a crew. As a matter of fact, even with the staff that we have in the operations department, we're always shorthanded. We have individuals that go off and they work either out in the oil and gas industry, but again, when the unemployment rate is so low, it becomes really difficult to hire the talented people that we need to implement some of the in-house stuff. But it is something that's on our radar. It is something that we're planning for in the near future, and we're hoping to be able to start repairing some of the roads ourselves.
You know, it's a good point that a lot of this work is done in-house, and of course a lot of that is done in the Parks and Recreation Department. So in fact, you've got a parks renovation that's kind of going on right now, Carl, that's all being done in-house.
Yes, we have a projects crew, and they do different projects. They do most of our neighborhood park renovation, and Brentwood Park is the one that's ongoing now. They're currently doing some hardscaping, landscaping around the Ruffini Church building now, and once they're finished with that, they'll get back on Brentwood Park.
And the Ruffini Church is, of course, in the Old Town.
Yes.
So again, if you have ideas, share them, because I think we have maybe run out of steam. Patricia New weighing in, please improve the shelter, better ventilation and more space overall. There are drainage issues and no safe spots to exercise dogs. So it's probably not surprising to you that you have a lot of people who are very passionate about the animal shelter.
No, not at all. I mean, I have 2 dogs and a cat at home, and we just love them. They're part of our family. So I do understand the passion for addressing the animal shelter. And as I mentioned a while ago, that is something that the City Council did direct monies toward last year. Now, I know Morgan, who is a director out there, does have some concerns over some of what needs to happen. And we've heard it today, actually, you know, some of the repairs that need to be done, some of the updating. And those are things that we hope to work toward here very shortly to get those things fixed.
You know, I think people think of the animal shelter as an adoption center, but that's not really the focus or the or the purpose of the animal shelter?
No, sir. The core service really, when you start looking at the core purpose for the animal shelter, really is health and safety of our community. We definitely do not want stray dogs, stray animals out there. Some of them that may be diseased. We want to make sure that we remove them and bring them into a place where actually they're actually sheltered in, but we're keeping our citizens safe, and that's our primary concern.
So as I mentioned, this is an opportunity to share your ideas. And so, if you have those ideas, go ahead and add them to the comments section, even as we are ending this broadcast. Also, again, our survey, cosatx.us/CIP input. And then we also hope that some of you will come out and join us Tuesday night, 5:30 at the McNeese Convention Center, where we'll be having another town hall meeting. This one will be live and in person, so please come out and share your ideas. If you can't make it though, we encourage you to watch that on the City of San Angelo Public Information Facebook page or on SATV Suddenlink Channel 17. And again, we hope you will participate in this. It's a very critical process and we need your input.